Worst coworker ever. I woke him up. The job that changed my life. At 18, I didn't want a dream job. I wanted money. In early 2000s America, minimum wage was trash. College debt was already scary, and my family didn't have a financial safety net. Then someone told me about a field job tied to energy infrastructure. Long hours, brutal conditions, but $20 an hour cash equivalent with overtime. That was real money. This wasn't glamour finance. It was boots on the ground capitalism. Travel stipends, per diem math, mileage reimbursement, and contracts written by people who assumed workers wouldn't read them. I read them. That's how I learned the hidden truth. Travel time was billable, vehicle mileage was reimbursed, and supervisors controlled how those numbers were logged. That's when I met Gary. Gary was my assigned supervisor, mid-50s, obese, angry at the world, and shockingly bad with money. He bragged about making bank, but lived paycheck to paycheck, drowning in credit card interest, child support arrears, and a quiet drinking problem that bled into work hours. Our job ran on a simple structure: two-man crews, 12-hour shifts, remote locations, and shared vehicle. Gary owned the truck. Gary claimed the mileage. Gary slept while I drove. Every single morning. He collected hundreds of dollars per week in tax-advantaged reimbursements, while I earned minimum wage for the same travel time. At first, I didn't realize what was happening. Then I did the math. Over a single month, Gary earned more from mileage reimbursement than I earned in base pay, all while unconscious in the passenger seat. And worse, he reminded me every day that I was replaceable. He mocked my inexperience, my background, my lack of a father. In financial terms, Gary was extracting value from me while degrading my leverage. I was young, I was angry, and I was learning. By the end, I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. What I didn't realize yet was that Gary's entire financial stability depended on one fragile assumption: that I'd keep driving. Once you see the numbers, you can't unsee them. Gary's paycheck wasn't impressive. His cash flow illusion came from reimbursements, untaxed, lightly audited, and entirely dependent on him being the driver of record. Except he wasn't driving. I was. Every mile logged under his name inflated his disposable income, while my wages stagnated. It was legal on paper, unethical in practice. Classic workplace arbitrage. When I suggested he split the mileage compensation, politely, privately, he exploded. Threats, job insecurity, verbal dominance plays. That's when I realized Gary didn't fear HR. He feared losing control of income. That night, in a roadside diner, he drank harder than usual. I watched him miscount cash, swipe a credit card he knew was near its limit, and complain about alimony like it was a market force conspiring against him. That's when the idea hit me. If Gary's ego ran his mouth, his finances ran his emotions. I didn't want to hurt him physically. I wanted to collapse his financial confidence. The next morning, he fell asleep as usual, and I drove toward a plan that would cost him more than money. 30 miles from the job site, I saw something on the roadside that would let me weaponize fear, control, and leverage, all at once. Fear is expensive. It spikes blood pressure. It clouds judgment. It causes people to make terrible financial decisions. I knew that instinctively, even before I knew it academically. On the highway pull-off sat a semi-truck, engine idling, the driver outside, stretching his legs. I asked for a favor. What happened next lasted less than 60 seconds, but rewired Gary permanently. The air horn, the screaming, the chaos. Gary woke up thinking he was about to die. When your brain believes death is imminent, it floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline, chemicals that don't care about your hypertension medication or your maxed out HSA. He lost control. Emotionally, physically, financially. When he later screams that I could have killed him and ruined his life, I understood something critical. Fear had shattered his perceived dominance, and dominance was the only thing keeping him solvent. By the time we reached the job site, Gary had already decided my fate, but he didn't realize he just destroyed his own. Gary fired me on the spot. He said the word like it carried power. It didn't, because employment isn't authority, contracts are. While he called the owner ranting about attempted murder, I sat on a toolbox doing something he never expected. I calculated. Mileage fraud, unlogged driving time, travel pay violations. Gary hadn't just exploited me, he'd exposed the company. When the owner finally arrived, he expected a monster. He got spreadsheets. I explained how Gary's reimbursements worked, who actually drove, how long this had been happening, and why firing me would create paper trails nobody wanted audited. The owner laughed, not nervously, relieved. Gary wasn't just a bully, he was a liability. By the end of that day, Gary still had his job, but he'd lost something far more important: control. I was reassigned. Gary wasn't fired, but he was financially neutered. No more sleeping, no more mileage games, no more dominance theatrics. And within months, he quit. Not because of me, because once the numbers stopped lying, his lifestyle collapsed. Years later, I went into emergency medicine. I learned exactly how close he'd come to a stroke that day. Do I regret it? Here's the financial truth. If someone builds their livelihood on exploitation, fear is a market correction. I walked away with confidence, leverage, and a career path. Gary walked away with debt, rage, and no control. That's capitalism. Have you ever worked a job where someone profited financially from your labor without doing the work? Like, subscribe, and comment if you want more real-life revenge stories that expose how money, power, and control actually work in America.